Today on Metaphysical Mississippi, a new installment of Ask a ... We'll be talking about the practice of witchcraft. We have 4 witches in our community. Join Krista and myself, your co-hosts, on this next episode. How y'all doing today?
Hey,
Good.
I'm so excited. I don't know if have we had this many? Maybe we have.
On other panels, but yeah.
We have Luna, Mercury, Sellena, and Willow. Thank y'all for coming on here.
Yeah,
I'm so
of course.
excited to find out all your answers to the questions. Sellena, this is your first time on the Metaphysical Mississippi podcast, but you and Luna are veterans. Y'all have so much more experience than we do. So
You're just playing fast and loose with the word veterans there.
Right.
in the podcast world. Yes, I have been binge watched y'all's podcasts, and I think it's very interesting. It just makes me want to learn more. So thank you for doing that, and that takes courage here in the state of Mississippi for y'all to be vocal in that way. So thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, we can learn. So you are a high priestess and an ordained minister of the Temple of Witchcraft. Is that right? You want to share a little bit more about your?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I've been practicing for getting close to 30 years. We won't talk about that part. I started training with the Temple of Witchcraft back in 2011, I believe, and completed their mystery school and seminary, and was initiated as a high priest in 2019. And I've been teaching classes and things like that. I'm currently the Aquarius lead minister for the temple, and we do all kinds of stuff. So even outside of Mississippi, and the home base for the temple is in New Hampshire, but we have initiates and students all over the world right now. So it's really growing kind of fast, and it's exciting. It's kind of exciting to be there while we're shifting from more of a local group to something that's having an impact internationally. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Yes. Have you always had a heart to be a teacher, or is it just this just resonated with you, and then
as far as teaching in some form or other, I would say yes, although that wasn't what I had assigned for myself as a career. I wanted to be an actor, and that was where my studying was. That's where my career was for most of my time coming up. I worked backstage and did production work and on stage and anywhere they would let me in the building, which to my detriment, because that's a lot. but yeah, the more my practice grew and the more I worked with my studies, and the more I really started to see the kinds of environments that witches and pagans were experiencing, not just here. We feel like it's just here. It's not just here. I really wanted to make a space where people could come together safely and learn, and know where to look for solid education, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and people get hurt from that kind of stuff. People get taken advantage of, and I hate that. So that's really what kind of pushed me to teach, and from starting that, I really fell deeply in love with it. Like, that's if there's one thing that I want to do forever in some form or other, it's teach. And I love teaching witches above anyone else. Don't tell my kids that, but it's true. It's true.
Oh, that's
I love
lovely.
that.
And were you raised, are you from the South?
I am. Can you not tell? I am. I'm from the South. I was actually raised in Simpson County. All my people are from Jones County though. So we've been here for a while. A very settled in, very Southern Baptist background, except for my dad's family, which was completely unchurched and just feral. So, we've got a little of that in the family too. So that probably was helpful.
Yes. So are you a first generation practicing witch that you are aware of?
As far as I'm aware, in my family, I am. Everybody has a grandparent that could heal warts, and your aunt who did a bit of folk magic. I had a grandmother that could read coffee grounds, and they would do all sorts of folk magic. It was deeply ingrained in the culture. But they wouldn't have called it that. They wouldn't have called it that. So we have had some people who were accused of being conjure people in our family, which they probably were, but they wouldn't call themselves witches in the way that I use that word.
I like that word.
Right.
Conjure. The summer solstice is upon us, and Litha, is that right?
That's right.
Is and I've just learned that word a week ago. So what do y'all have planned?
The Temple of Witchcraft is hosting a Litha ritual on Saturday the 17th, and we have for the structure of the ritual, the purpose of the ritual, we have all been a little burned out lately. We had a big event for Beltane, and we're all tired. There's a handful of us that really put in a lot of work to keep everything going, and we're tired. So the focus of the ritual is really going to be on drawing in sort of that solar energy and restoring our minds, our bodies, our hearts, restoring our compassion, refilling and refueling, and preparing for the rest of the year. So there's not going to be a whole lot of I'm going there to do a lot of transformative work this time. Right. We're just going to refuel. We've been working hard. We're going to rest up. We're going to bask in some of that solar light. So there is going to be a cauldron fire. These folks know how much I love a fire on the altar. So it's going to be a good time. One of our lovely members, Arbor, has written a beautiful chant for us just for this occasion, and can't wait to share it. So that's me.
Y'all know I come out of questions, and we're going to get to the listener questions in just a moment, because that is what we are trying to give other people an opportunity, people in our community, to ask questions instead of just me asking questions. But I have one more. Do you use a certain type of wood to burn, like when you're having an altar fire or cauldron?
There are all sorts of ways to do it, and I can tell you a few, because as you said, you want to get to listener questions. So there are some traditional woods. There's if you've heard the poem of the 9 woods, there's 9 traditional woods that you burn for different things, except for one of the 9 you don't burn. But and so
elder
you can
flowers.
You don't burn the elder. But there's all different ways that you can work with that and bring those qualities of that tree spirit into your work and into your spell work or your craft. But what we're going to be doing is actually an alcohol fire, and you can do so much with an alcohol fire because you infuse the alcohol with different herbs, different stones. You can do all sorts of things with it. Be careful with stones because they will explode. I just want to put that out there. Different stones can explode in fire, and then that becomes very, very lethal. But anyway, but yes, you can do all kinds of different ways to infuse those fires to be whatever you want it to be. But in general, alcohol fires are really purifying. They act kind of like an energetic vacuum cleaner. They can completely purify and clear a space. And they're very, very restorative. They're just full of this sort of dynamic vitality, in ways that different woods burn with sort of different qualities as well.
Yes. And the alcohol you use, is it I don't know. Is it something that is distilled? Do you use a certain something to get to distill it to its alcohol like state? And like I said, I really don't know what I'm talking about, but
that's okay. Well, I generally just use like rubbing alcohol from the grocery store.
Yeah,
but you want to use something with a high alcohol content. So something like 91%. You can use other alcohols for it, but that gets really expensive. And I'm a witch, so I don't have a whole lot of money running around. But I just use like rubbing alcohol. Works great.
Wow, I did this one time and didn't even know it.
You did?
I had a bottle of Everclear that I had in a spray bottle, and one time.
I have a feeling the word accident's going to be put in there.
Were your eyebrows purified right off your face?
Right. It was one of the times I was doing a bonfire, just burning stuff out of the yard, but it was one of those times, I don't know what time of year it was or anything. And I, because I can remember it. That's why it's like, I know it was significant to me, because there was something about, it was one of those burning the fire that I wasn't just burning trash. So yeah, like I felt like it was a meditative type experience, and fun. We'll do that, but I had fun spraying the fire with everything. But can I ask a question real quick?
I guess so.
Yeah, let me ask my listener question. So what does Litha mean? Is that what y'all call the summer solstice celebration, or what does Litha mean?
It's just me. Come on, you guys. Yes, that's a name that it's really applied back in like the 60s, 70s to this particular holiday. And there's, as with all the names for the Sabbats, there's lots of roaring debate about what's right, what's wrong, what's appropriate. A lot of times I just call it midsummer, but yes, Litha is the word for the summer solstice, and it was just a name that was applied to that. It doesn't go back thousands of years or anything. Some say that it has to do with the monoliths, like the standing stones that are aligned with the summer solstice. I don't know if that's true or if that's just what people ascribe to it because it makes sense. But yeah, so if anybody else has anything they'd like to say about it, I'd love to hear.
That's what I'd heard about the standing stones, and it's I didn't know if it was like real. It's just it's lore, so to speak. It's, but for me, it totally makes sense because you see it on the solstice and at Yule, the winter solstice. You see, perfectly aligned, and so. But I'm gonna go with that with what I kind of think. But yeah, I'm just exactly what Sellena said. It's
yeah.
But there's something about a mythic truth too, that things don't have to be, we don't have such a dogma in our traditions. Usually there can be, I'm not going to speak for all traditions, but usually, at least in the temple, we try to avoid a lot of dogma. So it doesn't really necessarily diminish our traditions and our practices, that it doesn't come from ancient times. It doesn't have to. We're a living tradition, and there's still we're still actively participating in our connection with divinity. So it's growing, it's evolving, and words change and move as they're needed by the people who are living them. So it really doesn't have to have anything beyond, this is the word that we use for it, and this is what it means to us, and that's fine. So, of course, it's different if you're borrowing words that are still connected to a living culture and have a cultural context. You want to have some understanding and clarity there before you start using a word that is tied to something else.
Right.
And that goes for anything. But Litha it's a Wiccan word that was made up in last century. So,
gotcha.
But it's still, it is a Sabbath, and we're turning the wheel of the year. And so what we're celebrating are those energies. And, there are a lot of different names for the different energies, but, it's that energy of the full summer where the sun is just like, giving us all that energy and, you know, bringing everything to life, you know, that's on the earth. Like everything's buzzing, the animals are buzzing, the flowers are blooming, like so much is happening and going on because it's the middle of the summer, you know, and it's the longest days. Like it's the time of year where our days are the longest. And so we're working with that sun energy and that, you know, I almost like youthful energy, you know, because it's kind of like the birth of the earth right now. So
yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that.
In my opinion.
No, you're right. You're right. It's all about that sort of peak of solar energy, you know. It's potent. It's very potent in the south.
Yeah.
It slows us down.
It's so slow.
Boy, does it. Man.
Well, would y'all like to get into the questions?
Sure.
Sure.
All right. Krista, do you have a certain order that you want to go?
I'm going to skip around because, like I said, we fly by the seat of our pants. That's what I was just looking at. So I want to start off with a simple question. Lena, like you said, y'all discussed a lot of things on your podcast. Tell us the name of that. It's Crossroads and Cauldron. Is that the name of your podcast?
Right. Crossroads and Cauldron.
Crossroads and Cauldron's podcast.
Yeah. I highly recommend our listeners to go back and listen, but we probably have some newbies to this whole genre. So what makes or defines a witch?
I like how you listed this as the simplest question, because this is probably the most complex question with the most varied answers.
I was like, which direction are they going to go with this?
Right.
I knew when you said it. When you said this is probably the simplest one, I was like, bet it ain't.
There it is. There it is. Yeah.
I will go with the simple definition of just the actual origin of the word, how I learned it. Witch, the actual word witch, was a word called Wicca, W-I-C-C-E, which means wise one. Just wise one. And then, you know, fast forward, you have so many definitions of a witch like that. Whoa. There's, and it actually goes with some of the other questions of the different types of witch. And I mean, it all, so it's a huge question, but simply witch actually translates, the word Wicca translates to wise one. So for me, the definition of what I think a witch is, and this is my personal definition, is just somebody who lives with the turning of the cycles, the seasons, lives with the land. I believe in animism. Everything has energy. Everything has a soul, so to speak. But for me, everything is alive. Everything, the trees, the rocks, the energy, the minerals that they carry, everything is from the earth. It's alive. So that's a witch, is somebody who works with those energies, who, and you don't have to use spells or anything like that. It's just somebody that connects with the energies of the universe and the cosmos and everything around them. And then there's things that go with that. You know, the craft is is spell work and more of that. It's not a religion. It's a way of life.
I like how you, I'm sorry.
No, please. Because I feel weird. I don't want to monologue it. Like I like the interaction.
I really like what you said there about the craft being separate from the identity. And that's true. I think that's true.
Really?
I agree with everything you've said there. You know, it comes back to, you know, wise people, you know, your cunning people, your people who have a connection to spirit in a way that not necessarily everyone does. And I think that's what distinguishes a witch as an orientation. I think it's an orientation to, you know, there's all kinds of questions about whether you can be born a witch or whether a witch is made. And I think it's both of those things. I think that all humans have the ability to make these kind of connections and awaken different powers and you know, awarenesses within you. But I don't think everybody has the desire or interest or drive to do that. And that's totally fine. But for those of us who are oriented that way, who are oriented to see beyond, you know, what is obvious, you know, I think that we do recognize those connections, and we stand between, you know. So for me, for my personal definition, although I recognize lots of definitions of witch, it is someone who weaves those two worlds together, who is the bridge between flesh and spirit, you know, that sees the consciousness, the living vitality in all things, and can work with it and can communicate with it and can use it. And as far as the practice of the craft, that's a different thing, because I think a lot of people practice witchcraft, and I think anybody can do a spell, whether they're a witch or not. You know, things work. But the practice of the craft is really the art of developing those skills and honing those relationships and building up your own awareness and your own consciousness and your ability to hold that vitality and use it for whatever it is you want to use it for. So as far as what someone does with it, that goes in 1,000 different directions, and it has hundreds of different labels, but I think it all comes back to that, you know, that connection.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Mercury, you had mentioned before how that a spell was a prayer in 3D. All right. Sometimes in prayer in the New Testament somewhere, that they talked about sometimes you have a request that you want to give to Spirit or God, but you don't really need the words to express it, but it already knows what you need before you ask it. So in witchcraft, do you believe that still your connection with Spirit, that you can still have an unspoken understanding with Spirit without having to do a ritual or to actually put it into words?
Actually, I think that's the whole goal. You know, the more you work on yourself, the more you're in alignment. So we would talk about that in terms of flow and being in the flow, doing your true purpose, doing your great work. You sort of, things just align and click into place for you. When you're aligned with yourself, you know yourself, you recognize your own BS. I don't know if I can swear on this show, so I'll just, great, missed opportunity. I'm sure there'll be another. But you know, once you get out of your own way and you really forge those connections and those relationships, and you're moving in the world and doing your true work in the world, which is different for everybody.
Right.
You are in that flow, and you go through a phase of studying and exploring witchcraft where first you're learning. You have an awakening usually and an awareness, and then you start learning and studying and developing yourself. And then you get to a point where you feel like I must not be doing very much anymore, because, you know, I don't feel, it doesn't take as much work. You're not necessarily having to do rituals all the time. You're not necessarily having to ritualize it, because you've forged such a connection with the universe that you do have that resonance. And things do just sort of start to align for you. So yeah, I think that's absolutely, I don't know that we would look at it as the universe knows what you want before you want it, because I think it's a matter of you're moving so authentically through the world, and you have forged this relationship that you have a resonance, you know, you're resonating together at the same time in the same way.
I understand that. Thank you.
That brings another question that Sarah asked that first question. Another question she asked, because now I knew not to put these in order, because I knew as we talked, I'll go out of the order. Sarah also asked, are spells similar or different to prayer? So I think we kind of answered that question a little, but does anybody want to just
I think they are, because it all, for me, I think a lot, I think it comes down to intent, the intent of what you're trying to accomplish. And so prayer, you go to God in prayer with an intention, right? I think spells are similar in that way. Now, others may disagree. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. There's not like a black and white line of this is how it is, and this is, it's just not. I mean, but for me, I think they're very similar in that it comes down to intent or what you're wanting to do, what you're wanting to accomplish.
I think that's definitely part of the work. And there are spells that are simply prayers, or they work in the same way. And those, we call those petition spells, where you're speaking directly to a deity or an energy or an entity and requesting their help in whatever it is that you're doing. So that is a type of spell work, but it's not the only type of spell work. And it's not the only mechanic that can activate that return, if that's what you're trying to do, or healing. So I guess it comes down to what you consider a spell. For me, I consider that any act of magic, anything that is creating change in the world through the use of your will. And that can absolutely be a prayer. It can absolutely be a petition spell, and it can be a wide variety of other spells as well. So I guess the answer is yes, and also no. Unfortunately, that's the answer to a lot of questions. So
we
have to hold with the mold that witches are ambiguous and mysterious. So there's this answer and then that answer. They're both.
Yeah. There's always a paradox, that's kind of part of the mystery of it, is being able to hold those two things, seemingly opposite things, all at the same time, and recognize the truth in both of them.
Well, okay, so Emily, do you have something?
No, I was going to say, is it always the intention of the not the petitioner, the petitioner, but is it always your will that you are, casting, or do you ever say to the universe, your will be done?
Going back to the great work, the overall work and goal of practicing witchcraft and elevating your own consciousness is to put your will in alignment with the universe's will. Because there's wants and there's will, right? And your wants are not necessarily in alignment with that. So yes, it's often asking the universe, and there's ways to break down what in the universe. We're all part of that, so your own will. And I don't necessarily think it all comes down to intention either, or we would never have any spell mishaps. And I will speak from experience. I have 100% gotten exactly what I asked for, and it was not at all what I intended. Learning to have a real clarity of communication with the energies and entities that you're working with is some of the very, very most important things that I think you can do as a witch, and getting clarity with yourself too, because we talk to ourselves in not helpful ways. We talk to ourselves in discordant ways, and we damage ourselves. And you got to remember too that everybody else's will is out there working also. So you have to really develop your power, develop a measure of potency if you're trying to override someone else's will.
Ooh, that's hard. Yeah.
Not to change their will, but somebody's going to win that lottery, right?
All right.
Maybe my little thing is, I like to say, I would like this, blah, 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 but it be for the highest good. Like if my want or desire is really not only not for the highest good of humanity or the earth or the universe, but may not be for my highest good either. Because winning the lottery could sure lead to a lot of
I'm glad you said that. That's absolutely important, and I teach my students that. We say for the highest good of all, harming none. Do put that on there, because when you forget, you usually get an unpleasant reminder not to do that.
Yeah, your words are important. Your words are very important, because you got to get very specific instead of pacific. If you know me, that's funny, huh? I always say Pacific instead of, you know.
We know what you mean.
We got you, girl.
Well, so that leads to the next question I want to bring up by Leisha asks, so what makes a spell work? Is it belief, protocol, ritual, ingredients, or a deity called on for help?
Ooh.
I would say all of the above. I think that, you know, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. Just like with anything, if I go outside to my garden and I say, oh, I'm going to grow a whole bunch of tomatoes this year, but I'm only going to plant one plant. You know what I'm saying? And then I'm not going to water it. I'm not going to talk to it. I'm not going to take care of it. I'm not going to give it any good, yummy, you know, compost or nutrients. I'm just going to put one plant out there and it's going to give me a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm not going to do nothing to it. You think that's going to happen? You think I'm going to get a lot of tomatoes? No, I'm not. I'm just going to get a few tomatoes off of that one plant. But if just like with a spell or, you know, your intention, what am I trying to say? Just like if you were to do a spell and you put a lot into it, I went outside and I planted 10 tomato plants. And every day I went out there and pulled the dirt up around them. I even added hay so that the dirt wouldn't splash up on the leaves and cause disease. I go out there and I talk to it and I tell it how beautiful it is and how much I want it to produce for my family. And, you know, and I might even talk to, call in Diana and be like, Diana, while you're out here looking over the wilderness, will you please take care of my plants? And on top of that, I'm out there pulling the worms off of it. You know, so I'm doing my work. And if you put your work into your spell, then your outcome is going to be a lot better.
That's such an excellent point that she's making there, because a lot of people forget that part because they sort of want the movie magic, you know, and it's called practice for a reason. And it's not because we sit on our backsides with it. Traditionally, there are 3 ingredients that you need for any spell to make it work. That is a clear intention of what do you want? What are you trying to achieve? If you don't know that, what are you even doing? Right. And a means of raising energy and a method of directing energy. So how that is accomplished could go in 100 different directions. And I'm going to include a 4th because you have to have the real world follow up. You know, you can't say, I want to win the lottery, do a great big ritual, raise your energy, call on your deities, call on your spirits, make your petition. All of that was beautifully done. You burned your candle down. All the spell work happened, but then you didn't go buy a lottery ticket. You know, you have to do your
plant more than one tomato plant.
Plant more than one tomato plant. You know, you're not going to win if you don't buy a ticket. Now, maybe you did so well that somebody just bought you one and said, "Here, I got you a lottery ticket while I was in Louisiana." Hey, great. That might happen too. But you know, it's just easier if you go buy that ticket. Put that as part of your spell. This is the winning ticket. You know, so that's how spells. That's the mechanic behind spell work.
Gotcha.
I love that. So Natalie asks, and y'all may have covered this in other podcasts, but just a quick little, how and when did you feel called to the spiritual path? I think Sellena kind of gave a quick little bit if you want to add anything to that, and we'll revisit. Sure.
Yeah, no, I was actually, interesting story. Maybe it's interesting to me. I was raised in a Southern Baptist home, kind of loosely. My dad was feral, and my mother was a preacher's daughter, though. So by the time she was grown, she was damn near feral too. But you know, we did go to church when I was little and things like that, and I just had a lot of questions, and nobody could really give me an answer. And I didn't know what it was at the time. When I was little bitty, I didn't think of myself as a witch. I remember looking back now, all of the play that I did was obvious to anybody watching, because I used to make little potions out of all the plants that I could find, and you just make a hole and you put them in there and you fill it with water and then you make a mud potion, right? Everybody did that, I thought.
I did.
But apparently that's not exactly normal. But all sorts of stuff, like I could speak to the wind. I remember, you know, we lived like on a little bit of a hill, and I would stand up on the hill and I would literally call up the wind. And I was aware that I was doing it because I just thought it was fun to make the wind blow and make it stop. You know, I didn't realize that was abnormal. So those sorts of things I did, but I didn't think of myself as a witch. What really got to me was I was about 12, I guess, and I was really, really trying to figure out what spirituality was, what divinity was, what does it all mean, what makes it all work. And the only place I knew to look was in the church, you know, of course. So I went to church and I was always asking all the questions and not getting answers. And I remember praying in my, I was going to sleep, I was praying for God to just make me stop asking questions. Please just make me just as easy to believe as everyone else, because they were telling me I didn't believe hard enough. And it was like, baby, I'm trying. So I remember doing that. And then I remember even at that young age thinking, this is fucked up. You know, why am I asking this question for him to shut down my curiosity? That it didn't feel right to me. And then I sort of made a decision at that point, because the questions that bothered me were people being sent to hell that had just never happened to hear about Jesus. And I was a student of history even as a young child. So I knew when Christianity actually appeared on the map and what happened to all of those generations and generations of people before. They're just suffering in hell. There just became a point where it didn't make sense to me. And it became a point where if this is true, and if this is the way we treat creatures that you made, just because they haven't heard of a particular person that you made, I don't want anything to do with you. You know, if this is what you're about, I'm out. So it was a conscious choice of, this is just not for me. Whether it's completely true and I'm completely wrong is irrelevant. It was a choice. And I think that was an empowering step for me, because it wasn't a matter of who's right, who's wrong. It was a matter of, I don't hold with this. This doesn't match with my morals and my integrity. So it's a decision I'm making, whether I'm right or wrong in it. And from there, I started studying just really hard, everything I could get my hands on. And I read a book, and I'm sure it was probably some Scott Cunningham, because that's what was easily available to my little self. Fortunately, my mom was a little bit unchurched at that point. At that point, she would buy me whatever I asked for, which is great. So I was reading, and I just in the poetry and in the descriptions and in the magic that they were talking about, I felt a resonance, and I felt, this is it. It felt like something I remembered, you know, something half remembered and something half forgotten from some part of my soul, really just came alive. And I was like, this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be. And then it's just been nonstop from there. So that's how I came to it. It was a moment of desperation. Look, there you go. Is that your first one?
That is a very, very old copy of that very first Magic Herbalism, Scott Cunningham.
I love it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Tower Records had all the greatest books as a kid growing up. I mean, I came across it very early, but I also grew up, I guess you would call it, I grew up in a metaphysical home in Southern California. So very different. I didn't have, you know, the very culturally conservative, religious, everybody had to be the same. California is kind of more of a melting pot. So it was a little easier to be out of the broom closet at a very young age. And I just exactly like Sellena, just knew that, devoured every piece of information I could. So books. Soon realized that Llewellyn Publishing was a great one, because it was almost always already kind of vetted. So most stuff that came out of that publishing house was going to be something. And not everything's for me. And that's one thing, you just, whatever resonates with you, go with that, learn it. And I'm a reference book like junkie. So I love reference books. And that's something I've always just held on to and kept. And so for me, just great books. And then in the beginning of internet, Witchvox was like a crazy.
Oh yeah.
Remember that? Oh,
I still had a Witchvox account when it closed. I was like, no.
I got the email. Okay, it's ending. What, like 30 years later? No, 20. I don't know. It's been around forever. Like in the beginning of internet, it was a crazy amount of information on anything you could ever find.
Do you remember the correspondence courses before that? You'd have to like subscribe to the magazine.
Yes.
And then they would do like phone sessions where you call in at a certain time. And it was a chaotic nightmare.
It's kind of like the beginning of the Zoom call, really. Like it was
right?
Zoom. It was just a phone.
You're welcome, world.
Yeah.
So Kelly, if you grew up, because I think sometimes, I know in my Christian walk earlier, when in Christianity, there was this thing about witnessing, or when did you accept Jesus as your Savior, and all the, you know, like there was a point where, oh, I'm being called to this. So since you grew up in metaphysics, like for me, it was an adult when I finally, you know, like embraced it openly. So when did you feel the call to this? If it was always a part, was it always a part, or was there one day that you were like?
I seriously believe that the universe turned me on at birth. Like I have had gifts, extrasensory gifts since birth. And thankfully I grew up, you know, my parents divorced when I was 6, but she had me baptized in the Lutheran church. You know, she was like, she called herself Lutheran, but I never went to church, like ever. Not until I came here, like really 20 years ago. But so it was just something I just was, I think. And, you know, like I grew up, my dad, you know, we a spoon that he bent at their metaphysical group, you know, on with the books, and, you know, it was just on the shelf, and that just that was normal. I guess. And I was like 8 when I found, like, when I discovered crystals, like 8, I was 8, you know, put my fingers in a big barrel of crystals, and you fill a leather bag for like $3 or whatever. It was probably $1 back then. So I'm going to be 49 next week. So I've been like, it's just been, I don't know how to be anything other. Like, this is just, I was exactly like Sellena doing, like with it was part of my everyday. It wasn't, you know, it's just part of my life. And so the more I learned and the more I just I would able to learn more about things I liked. And so kind of like maybe, you know, when you start to put labels on things, like I call myself a green witch only because, you know, I really, really, and not even just that, I'm eclectic. Like, boy, anything that resonates and that isn't, you know, appropriating or from a closed practice, if it feels right, I believe that it may be something that was mine a long time ago. I don't know. Like it feels right, and it is aligned with my purpose. Like, and it's something that I'm going to look into and then add into my little toolbox, you know, my little caboodle. Like it's.
I remember those. Luna, what about you? I mean, I think your story, is yours a little different than Mercury's, or where you feel like you were called to this path always, or was it a?
You should talk to you, Luna.
I was just wondering who she was talking to.
Luna.
For me, I grew up in the woods. I was a tomboy. I climbed trees and caught frogs and lizards and all that kind of stuff. My mother's parents had a gravel driveway. And I remember this probably, I was maybe 3. And I started pulling all the quartz out of the driveway. And I would collect it and put it in a little bucket. And I think I don't know if it was that year or a year after it or so, they bought me a rock tumbler, one of the first ones that they had out. And those things are really noisy. So it went out in the carport, kind of thing. But I learned that I could actually shine them up and do things with them. I had no idea there was any energy related to them or anything. But I just knew that I was drawn to that. And growing up, I felt more comfortable in the woods than I did anywhere else. And I would just let my imagination run wild. It's really hard to pinpoint specifically, it was the energy of the trees and the animals and all. It really wasn't. It was just the world in general, the earth itself. Gaia, God, whatever you want to call it. It was just that attraction for me. It was unimpeded. In church, you were questioned and you were told to believe, not asked to believe. And so my dad was a preacher's kid. My mom grew up in church as well. And I'm kind of like Sellena, by the time my dad became an adult, he was pretty much feral. But I loved church. I really, really did. I loved the music of it. I'm a singer, so I was in the choir since I was able to walk, but as I got older, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me anymore. It was more man-made than creator-made, if that makes any sense. And so that's where I got my start from, was just playing in the woods and digging in my grandma's driveway.
I love that. Love that. Yeah. Willow, did you want to add anything when you felt like have you always felt called to the spiritual path, or this where you are now?
Well, I mean, I grew up kind of in the woods too. I mean, I grew up in the city some and out in the woods, but I loved it. I mean, I would go walking down the trails and whistle with the birds, and me and my little brother would sneak off out in the woods and build fires and smoke my daddy's cigarettes. I've always been a rebellious one. I never liked being told what to do. I was very defiant, whether it was in school or whether it was in church. My mom's side of the family in Louisiana, everybody was Catholic, and my dad's side up in North Mississippi, everybody was Baptist. So when I was with, my grandparents on my mom's side, I would go to the Catholic church, and then vice versa. And my mom, I guess you could say she was kind of feral. I like that. That's funny.
I love it.
We would go like on
great word.
Yeah, we would just go to church, on a holiday or on Christmas, maybe once every 10 years or so. But as an adult, I found myself searching. I had some traumatic things happen to me, and I kind of found myself searching, like, what's going on? And I ended up running to the Catholic Church, and I spent 2 years in RCIA, and it just wasn't, there was some moments, but it wasn't fulfilling me. It wasn't, the more I read and studied the Bible, the more I was like, this can't be like this. This isn't true love. This isn't pure love. This isn't unconditional. It was just too much. Do this, don't do that. And I'm not good with that. Yeah. So I think I searched and I kind of hit a rock bottom in my life around when I was about 40. And that's when I turned my TV off and I started reading, and people started coming in my life. And I found the Facebook group, Kelly came into my life, and True Local Market came into my life. And then I realized I was surrounded by witches. And I know I've told this story 100 times. But it's a little different every time though. But I started looking to myself, and then the things started coming to me. And then I found the pagan meet and greet, and then I found the temple, and that's really where I felt called to be. And that's what really kind of showed me who I was, and I was like, wow. Somebody asked me if I was a green witch one time, and I went and read about a green witch. I'm like, well, hell yeah, this is me. Yeah. But I'm very eclectic as well. I tend to bits and pieces here and there, and learning with the temple, it allows me to do that. So that's kind of how I guess it's been about 10 years or so since I started my path.
Well, that leads to the next question I want to ask. And this is a question from Russell. It's two parts to the question, and I'm just going to ask both parts, and then y'all can have at it. First of all, can you be a Christian and be a witch? And another question about religion is Wicca, WICCA, a religion?
Yes, that's a religion.
Go.
All right, I'm ready. Here we go.
Yeah.
Yes. Short answer is yes to both. You can be a Christian witch, because witchcraft is that orientation, is that connection to divinity. And how you label that divinity is up to you. How you experience that divinity, how it expresses itself in your practice is up to you. There are tons and tons of Christian witches. There are whole traditions that are monotheistic. And, all of the voodoo traditions, they're monotheistic. They have one deity. So absolutely you can be a Christian witch. Yeah, I get that question a lot, actually. I don't know why they would be counterintuitive unless your brand of Christianity doesn't allow you to empower yourself, in that way. And that's fine, because that exists. As for Wicca, it depends on the Wiccan you ask, because there are different, some Wiccans cling to that word. I think it's important for us to use that word because it does confer legal protections as well in this country. You can't, being spiritual is not protected under the law, but a religion is. And if you look at the word religion, it really just means to yoke, to connect to something beyond yourself. And I think that we can all relate to that. People get hung up on the word religion because they equate it with the word dogma, and that's not the same thing. But I get it, people can use whatever words they want to use. So some Wiccans consider their practice a religion, some don't. And whichever way they go on it, they generally feel very strongly about it in my experience. So I'm not going to speak I don't consider myself to be Wiccan, but I know quite a lot about it. So no, I would say it can go either way. You may meet Wiccans that have a strong opinion. So there you go. That's my answer.
And the Wiccan religion, isn't that kind of, at least in the past 100 years or so, like
1950, 60, Gerald Gardner.
That's getting close to 100 years.
No, stop.
No, it is. And there's a lot of different branches that particular stream comes through. And there's British traditional Wicca, there's American forms of Wicca, so there's all different ones. So it from outside of the community, people just kind of clump Wicca as one monolith, but it really isn't. It's a very diverse community. Like, you can put Christians all in a clump, but you've got your Baptists and your Catholics and your Episcopalians, and they're halfway pagan anyway. So they're very, very different expressions, and some of them are almost totally different belief systems, if you get down to it. So the Wicca is very much like that. It's a very varied tradition, and there's lots of different expressions of it. So yeah, it's hard to look at it as a monolith, but it is new. Yes, correct. It's new.
So that, I never thought about that, but could the fact that Wicca being considered an organized religion, though, is important maybe for those who practice, but because like you said, for
protection under the law.
Protection under the law.
And we've only really had that since like the 70s. So I know when I was first coming up in the craft, you called yourself Wiccan, whether you were or whether you weren't, because that witchcraft wasn't necessarily protected. The Temple of Witchcraft tradition is a protected, but we are a recognized church. But witchcraft in general, not protected. You know, however you identify, there are some traditions that are and some that are not. And I'm really grateful for the work that those early Wiccans did to make sure that we had those legal protections, because, you know, in the 80s and 90s, I said I was Wiccan to everybody because that was the only thing that would protect me from losing my job, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And my workplaces didn't always know that. And so once you had to point out, actually, this is religious discrimination, they had to change their attitude.
Yeah. Wow. So
Emily,
that is, I saw your text. Give me just a second.
I had a thought that I wanted to, a question I wanted her to go to next.
Well, I've had several people ask one version of that or another, and I'm trying to see how I want to ask it.
Weed through it, yeah.
Okay.
I'm so curious now.
And I'm like, what is question?
The mystery question.
It must be juicy.
Right. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to one of Sarah's questions, because but several other people asked a similar question to this. So well, first of all, I had never heard this term. Have y'all heard the term the witch wound? Is that something?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Does one of y'all want to explain that? I mean, I can guess what it means, but what does it mean to y'all? Mercury, what is your interpretation of that?
That for me is like someone who feels that they've been persecuted because of their witchcraft in this lifetime or another. I don't feel like I have that. But I do know that I've always been this way in every lifetime. Like this is who I am. This is my soul. Like I am this person that's always looking for information and you know, wanting to, I mean, that my name, that's why I got Mercury. That's what it is. I am that. Like I am that. So I'm that all the time, but I don't ever feel like I don't have that. So I'm going to I don't know if anyone else on the panel feels that. There you go. Oh yeah. Willow does.
I've had an experience. I think it was maybe year 2. It may have even been year 1 or year 2 with the temple. And we were, because I did my past life regression before we did it, because you were like, you're going to love year 3. And this was like, it may have been year 2. And I did some past life regression stuff, and it was bringing up a lot of things. And I had I had like a journey and saw myself back in a situation and during the burning times where it wasn't necessarily me, but it was like my sisters, and I was there and I saw it and I felt it, and it was like I experienced it. So that that was a little traumatic for me. I remember when we had lunch. I asked Sellena to go to lunch with me because I wanted to talk to her about it, because it was, I mean, it was pretty real. A lot of this stuff was new at the time to me, so it's taken me a while to process it and really know, like that was a past life that you were in, and your friend, my friend was there with me, and I still don't know if, you know, if we were sisters or if we were just friends or what the situation was, but it was very real. It was very hurtful. It was very painful. And even to this day, like they have on Netflix, they have different shows and stuff that you can watch. And it's hard for me to even read different things. I also experienced a dream that I believe was a past life. And I was telling Kelly about it, and she was like, she kind of helped me realize that it was, I was experiencing being, it was a traumatic experience, like with, like when the Jews, like I felt like I was being contained and I was trying to hide and barricade. And I would have to read, it's been a minute now. I would have to like look and see exactly what had happened. But I've had a couple of experiences that were my past lives that were very traumatic. And one was a witch, and one was just because I was a Jew and I wasn't a Christian, and I was being persecuted because of that with other people. So I don't know if that's really the question you were asking, but that's my experience. That's my experience.
So yes, Sarah had asked, do any of y'all recognize past lives as witches? And Laura asked about the witch wound, and I knew that was those questions that were connected.
I'd like to speak to that if there's time.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I've seen. I'm with Kelly on that. I don't think I personally carry that particular as a wound, that affects my practice or my path. I don't have a feeling of being persecuted. I've had situations of discrimination in this life,
Oh yeah.
I don't carry an act from that place, and I don't think Willow acts from that place either. That's not what I'm saying. But I have seen a lot of expressions of this, where people come into this life with a wound from a past life, and it could be this type of wound. The witch wound is an archetypal wound. There are all sorts of different archetypal wounds that you can carry into your following lives, but this particular one is literally about being outcast from your society, being removed from your social group, which is a huge trauma to humans, especially when we relied on each other so much for our survival, and otherwise being othered, and particularly if it comes with a death or a traumatic or violent experience because of that. So people do sometimes carry that, and that's why I think a lot of times people feel that persecution complex, even if they don't necessarily experience a lot of othering necessarily in this lifetime. They feel really afraid to come out. They feel really afraid to express their have strength of will in their practice, because they carry these unhealed wounds. So it can be, I think it's a very real thing. I don't think it's just a psychological thing. I don't think it's an attention-seeking thing. Maybe it can be, but I do think it's a real wound that's out there. But I don't think every witch has it. I don't think they didn't do a whole lot of catching actual witches, so it's really the witch wound is a universal thing that can really affect anyone, even outside of witchcraft. But I do think there is a certain otherness that we feel just in general. We feel a little out of sync with the vast majority of our society. And I think like Mercury's been saying, from birth, we feel a little other, a little different. Whether or not people in society make us feel othered or recognize how separate we are or can be, but we recognize our otherness. And I think if you have that recognition on top of carrying the witch wound, from a previous life, I think that can be vicious combination, and can be difficult to heal, you know. So I think that's why it does pop up a lot for witches, because we already have that otherness, you know, present. So it's a little harder to move through life, you know, with carrying also that traumatic wound. But I don't personally have it, so I really appreciate hearing Willow's experience as well.
Yeah, and so if you've, whether y'all have experienced this or maybe other people in the community that you may have mentored or just listened or held space for, were there ever, what are some of the ways that a witch who may think they have that trauma still in their soul that they need to work through, or that part of their soul they need to retrieve and heal, what are ways that you can heal that or reclaim your power over it?
There's so many ways you can work with that. And you actually hit on one almost precisely with your language there, which I thought was really interesting. I saw Mercury. She was like, "Oh yeah, you got it. So I'll like to speak to two aspects of that. And then if anybody else wants to jump in, I'd love to hear that too. So some of the most healing ways is doing past life regression work. And we're going to remove the quotes. We'll remove the air quotes and say these are witches and they do have this wound. And the one thing they can do is doing past life regression work can be extremely healing. Just being present and holding space for that previous life, that previous experience, being present and recognizing this is something that happened. It, you know, wasn't your fault. It occurred, and that's not what we're living now. This is something we can release and let go of, because a lot of times they're just unconscious of it. And bringing it into consciousness, bringing it into awareness is oftentimes enough to release it, you know. And then you would basically treat it like any other type of trauma. Process it. There's a million ways to heal different types of trauma. It depends on how the trauma unfolded and how it's affecting your life. So I'm not just going to put generic, this is what you need to do to heal, because it may not work in your particular situation. But working with a healing facilitator, working through counseling, I highly recommend therapy for all. But another way that you can, besides just bringing consciousness, bringing awareness to it, processing it, the witch wound itself. Okay, so I did past life regression. The other thing you said, soul, finding that part of your soul. It's literally called a soul retrieval, and it's a type of shamanic healing. It's a shamanic healing technique, and you literally, and this is a more advanced technique. You literally journey to find, the idea behind it is that a piece of your soul kind of breaks away during a trauma. In psychology, they have different language for this. But that part of yourself detaches because it just can't handle what's happening. And that can just be sort of lost to you, and you feel an emptiness. You feel like there's a hole. You feel like something's missing. And it literally is that. And so you have to do the work to actively seek that out. It's usually done in journey or meditation or ritual ceremony. Or the combination, and you seek out that lost part of yourself and you reintegrate it. And that's a measure of work as well, just to convince that piece that, hey, this isn't going to happen to you again. You got to come back home. And it's in different traditions, it's literally called singing the soul back home, which I think is beautiful. And it gives me like goosebumps all over. Well, but it's about reintegrating that aspect of yourself and recognizing it as a thing that happened and part of your larger history, your larger history of lifespans, but it doesn't define you. It doesn't define, that experience doesn't define who you are. It doesn't diminish your power in any kind of way. And that can be difficult for people to recognize sometimes. So it's a big healing, but there's definitely ways to do it for sure.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Any other comments or thoughts before we move?
I just love how you explained soul retrieval. So I really thank you for doing that.
Yeah. So our next question was sent in by Janet. How do you stay focused on your craft when working alone? How do you keep life from sidelining you. So can I want to ask a question, but before that,
Okay.
A pre-question question.
Yes. In your practice, do you find yourself more of a solitary witch or more part of a community or a coven, or is it a little bit of both, or have you had different seasons of your life when you were more solitary and then more, and then we'll get to the question, if you're more solitary, how do you stay focused?
Well,
Luna,
for me, it's been a mix. You know, when I found this community that I'm within now, I didn't know such a thing existed. So I guess you could say I was solitary up until this point. And I've been within this group, what is it now, Sellena, 8 years, 9 years?
Yeah, it's coming up on that.
Time.
A long time.
I think she was in her second year of school when we met. And
that would have been, yeah, you're coming up on nine.
Yeah.
Oh, we're getting close to 10 years. That would have been 10 years.
Well, okay.
11. Yeah. Shit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
11 years.
Yeah. Wow. Time flies when you're having fun. I guess we're having a lot of fun. We are actually. But yeah, no, it's very nice to have a community where you can partake of ritual with others who are like-minded. Everybody is at a different point on their path, so it's really nice to have others that you can talk to and compare things and discuss things and learn things from. So but you know, before that I was just like Mercury, you know, Llewellyn, you know, any book that I could get my hands on that was, you know, interesting, I would grab hold of it and just devour it, you know, because there was nobody to really talk to about it.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I don't think I put a name to it until I found this community. So,
right, because there was a time when social media and you know, chat rooms and all that weren't a thing.
Yeah.
Wasn't a thing.
I mean, I remember payphones, you know.
Yeah.
And at first Atari, you know, that kind of stuff. I'm old, but
sending letters, getting stuff in the snail mail.
yeah. If you ordered anything out of the ordinary, it was through the mail, you know.
Yeah.
The pyramid collection.
Yeah. Or I mean, if you were lucky, they had witchcraft books in the library, but you'd be lucky if you found one, you know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was when Books A Million came along, that was great for me, but that was when I was much older too. So
right.
Yeah.
Right, more free. So Willow, do you want to?
What was the question?
Well, you
I was thinking about books. I trailed off into, you were talking about ordering the books, and my first experience with like books was as far as witchy books or metaphysical books was at Rainbow and Fair Trade. They had, you could just borrow books, and that was where I read, you know, started reading my books. And then they would just give me like, Krista, you need to read this here. You can borrow this.
That's awesome. I think my first metaphysical book actually came from Time Life, to be quite honest. That dates it any.
Oh, my first books on like studying the craft was like studying things from Plato and like, you know, that Neoplatonism and all of that was really, and I was like, this sounds very magical. And then it just tied together once I started reading actual witchcraft books much later. Yeah. But so the question was whether you're solitary or if you practice in a community.
Right. Yes.
Well, I'm definitely not a solitary witch.
Now, especially.
If I'm not with our circle, I'm at work and I'm just surrounded by it. Like I do a lot of solitary work, and especially during COVID. You know, COVID taught me how to be a solitary. And still then I was still doing stuff I probably wasn't supposed to be doing, like having people over and having Sabbats and get-togethers anyway. But it was just
I think I was one of them, but anyway.
But you know, that was nice, but I really do enjoy our circle, and then I enjoy, you know, Kelly and I get to work together every day, just about, you know, at least 3 or 4 times a week. So, I mean, it's, you know, it's that's all we talk about. We live in our metaphysical world. It's when we step outside of it, we start to feel weird these days.
I don't really step outside anymore. I just look out there and I'm like, everything's still fucked up. I'm staying out here. I'm good.
That's a good way to put it.
But there probably are a lot of people that do, you know, I think we're all like, we love to collaborate in the community, and but there are people that are more solitary, either by choice or by necessity, because there's just not community there, or by choice because you know,
messy,
for some people that's a very do what?
I said, because community's messy.
Yes,
yes. The first 15 years of my practice were solitary. I didn't know a single other soul that you know even thought this way at all. And I think Willow has hit the nail right on the head. Like, we all, you know, no matter whether we practice in community as well, have a solitary practice, or I hope we do, because my practice is going to be different. There's nobody in my community or in my circle that has the exact same practice as me, because there's nobody doing the exact same work as me. Nobody's working with the exact same spirit relationships as me. You know, so while we come together in community, and it gives us that container and that cauldron for us to grow and learn together and play off each other, and tagging back to what Luna was saying, we all are on different, I think that was Luna. I'm confused now. But we're all on different levels. We're all on different journeys. We all have different focuses. And so we teach each other, you know. I might be, you know, the high priestess right now, but there's everybody who comes in the door. Some of my level 1 students are so inspiring to me in their work and the way that they're approaching their work, and they have so much wonder and excitement, and every single time I learn something from them. Don't tell them, because I still charge them a fee, but I learn so much from them, and so much from being able to look at this stuff again with fresh eyes. They see things that I missed because my experience was different, and so my practice deepens every time I work with a new student. And then I still have my teachers as well, which they don't live here. My teacher's in New Hampshire, so I don't get to practice, you know, with him in person. My classmates, you know, were scattered around. They weren't here with me because, like I said, my teacher was in a different state. So we did our learning online. Isn't that crazy? What a crazy world. But it was kind of crazy at first. I was like, you can't learn witchcraft online. You can. But we didn't get a lot of time to practice together. So we come together. We have some events that we do together in person over the year. And, you know, I consider it a pilgrimage. Going to Temple Fest every year. Yes, it's a festival. Yes, it's fun. We're learning, but it's a pilgrimage. It's a way for me to step into the land where my tradition is anchored. It's a chance for me to, you know, give my teacher a hug, and to see my classmates, and to stand in circle with those other people in my community, and to listen and to learn from others, and they're experiencing the same techniques and the same experiences, but they have their own expression of it. And all of through that gives me such a broader view of what's possible. And I think that's what I really love about witchcraft, is that it's just constantly unfolding, and there's always something new. Even if it's the same, you lit this same candle every day for 25 years, every single day there's going to be a different flavor. There's going to be a different energy that steps forward and has something to teach you. So it's just a constant unfolding, and it's a constant wonder, and it's a constant joy, whether you're in community or not. And if you lose sight of that, that is when you run into trouble, when it becomes rote and you lose the wonder of it. And it's easy to do when you get burned out. One of your questions you asked, and I don't know, is this the second question? Are we on the first question and then there's the mystery question? I don't know. But you had asked about the separation between your practice and your life. And for me, they're not separate. If I'm breathing, I'm practicing. And but yes, there's a point in learning where everything feels very separate. You know, you do your magic and it feels like this is the magic, and going to work and paying my bills is the mundane. You'll get to a point, if you keep going, keep practicing, where everything merges together. And every time you sign a check, you're giving a gift to the universe. Everything you're doing is a little act of magic. Pouring my coffee is an act of magic. Stepping my feet on the grass is an act of magic. You know, just being present, your divine presence is an act of magic. And we forget that entirely too much, I think. So yeah, I don't know. I think I went off the rails. I'm sorry, I get lectury. I am a teacher after all. You just have to mute my mic.
But well, the original question was, how do you stay focused on craft when working alone? Because how do you let life keep you from sidelining you? And what I think you answered is that your life is your practice. Exactly. Your life is your craft.
But there's a certain fire, and I think this differentiates witches from different types of people. There's a passion for it. There's I don't know if it's a morbid curiosity or what, but there's a desperate desire within us to seek out, to answer the next question, to look under the rock and see what's crawling around under there. You know, there's a divine discontent within us, and we're always looking for that next connection, that next question. So you can be definitely burnout, and you can definitely be overrun by life. And when you are, you know, it can be very difficult, but usually the first sign is that you've stopped asking the question. You know, and the only solution for it is to just do it. Just light a candle, just light an incense stick. You know, just remember who the hell you are for 5 seconds, and it will reignite that passion. And it doesn't take a lot. Like there you go. Speaking of candles, you know, but really just like little acts of magic. It doesn't have to be a big ritual. That's where people get off the rails, is when they overlay expectations on their practice of, it has to be this, it has to be that. Oh, I didn't do my meditations at all this week, so I guess I'll just quit. No, just little acts of magic. Just recognize, bring consciousness, bring awareness to your day in some tiny way. Journal, you know, that's the one I like to, I'm always harping on people to journal.
Journal about it.
Our next listener question is from Heidi, and she asks, what should you look for when seeking out a teacher, mentor, or coven? And I'd like for y'all to briefly tell what a coven is. I've heard that term. So let's first somebody tell us what a coven is. Sellena, I'm gonna let you.
Okay. So a coven is a practicing group that works really intimately together. So obviously this is one of those, every coven's going to have a different definition of what their work is and how they work it. So in the context of Wicca, you have specific roles within the coven, and specific, usually they're sort of teaching covens, and through their training process, they branch out into different covens. So like once you attain high priesthood, you leave the coven that you trained with and you start your own. So every coven is going to be different though, but essentially it boils down to, it's a very intimate working group of practitioners. And usually there's some method of training. There's usually some method of initiation into the group. There's usually certain rules about keeping the secrets of the group. They're not all oath bound like that, but most of them usually have some aspect that's oath bound. But they're very, very intimate. So a lot of people confuse any group of witches as a coven, like, you know, like a murder of crows. It's not quite like that. A coven is a very specific thing, but yeah. So people don't necessarily recognize the intimacy level, because you really are making a commitment to the people in the group, and they can get real messy. And that's part of the process of it. It's a safe place for y'all to get messy with each other and work through it. But most covens explode when you get to the messy part. You got to keep going. If you've just recently started a coven and you're just starting to work with each other, there's going to be a lot of, part of the mechanics of that magic is working out where you fit. And that can be a difficult process, and it changes over time. So stick with it. If you're newly formed coven and you're starting to fight with each other, fight it out, but stay together, because then it gets good. But most of them sort of explode.
Is it necessary to be in a coven, or can you
No,
just
it is
have
not.
community?
You can absolutely have community. The Temple of Witchcraft is not a coven. So we are a community of witches. We're a magical order. So we are lots of training. We're very academic. We love to study. We're big nerds, which a lot of witchcraft communities are big nerds, and I love that. But yeah, we consider ourselves a circle. Or for individual communities of the temple, but together we're a magical order. So it's not a coven. It is initiatory, but you don't have to be an initiate to come to public events. There's public events and there's initiates only events. But most of our stuff is not oath bound. It is proprietary because somebody had to write it, and they should be, they should receive compensation for their work.
Right.
But it's not oath bound in that sort of way.
Won't be long.
But someone who practices witchcraft or just resonates with being a witch does not have to be in a coven.
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, I discourage it for a long time until you know yourself really well. It's like being in a marriage. Okay, you don't want to jump in. You got to get to know each other first. You got to know what you're bringing to the table before you jump in there too.
And work on yourself a little while.
Work on yourself a long while before you join a coven. Make sure
and
your
then don't
mates
stop
are working on themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't ever stop.
So back to that, the question was, what should you look for when seeking out a teacher or a mentor or a coven?
Well, first,
I'm gonna ask Willow, what when you were seeing that community, what were you looking for?
I wasn't looking. I don't know how I ended. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know where the school must have just came up on the website, and I was like, I'll just fill this out. I know I'm not gonna make it in. I'm just gonna fill this out and see how it goes. And then I was like, oh wow, I got accepted. So I would definitely ask around if you like, we do have a tight community. I mean, with all of our different stores and our different groups that we have, I would definitely ask a lot of questions, and if something feels off, listen to your gut. Definitely go with your intuition. And if you feel something's off, then get the fuck out of there. Like, you don't have to stay anywhere, that you don't want to. But I would, and I'm trying to think like what questions you would ask, but if you want to join a group or find a teacher, you want kind of the same similar, outcome, whether it's, I'm just wanting some knowledge on different subjects, or, what are you looking for? Are you looking to form a connection? I think it just really depends which direction you're going in, and maybe asking around, and getting a feel for it, you'll know. Like, I didn't even go to my first class. I signed up, I paid, I chickened the fuck out. I didn't read all the book. And I was like, I didn't read all the book. They're going to ask me questions. I'm not going to know the answers. Like, I was going to go to jail or something if I didn't know the right answer, I think we really overthink things a lot, and that we just really need to listen to our intuition. I did end up going to the second class, and our class, actually, everybody was like, let's all go to the water. So everybody was going to the water, and I'm like, okay, I'll go to the water. I'll do that. And so we met, and I met everybody and ended up going to the class, and everything worked out fine. But you know, I do a little bit of research and make sure, you know, you're not joining a, you know, something that you don't believe in or care to know about. So just, you know, make sure you have similar interests there. And if you're not feeling it, then you don't have to stay. There's, you know, always something else or someone else or another teacher. I tell my clients all the time when they come to me for advice on different herbs and stuff. And I'm like, you know, go to the doctor, get some tests done, find out what's really going on with you. And if you don't like what that doctor's telling you, go get another doctor, you know. And that's the same way here. If you don't like your teacher, there's other teachers out there. And with the internet, oh man, you can, like, you know, it doesn't have to be local in town, and you can still be a solitary and take classes online. I mean, there's so much available these days. I mean, I know people all throughout the Appalachian Mountains, and I know people in Alabama, you know, met people in Hawaii, you know, so you have options. So I would just definitely see what resonates with you, would be the main thing.
And there are definitely
you can cut some of that out if you like.
Now, I think you hit on something important, because there are some charlatans out there. There are some abusive people out there. There are people looking to take advantage. A lot of people that come into witchcraft, if you're coming to witchcraft, you've probably seen some stuff. You know, you've either had a psychic experience that has either scared you, or you've been told that you're crazy at least once by somebody, or you've had a spiritual experience. You know, you've had an awakening experience. And, you know, if you're coming to learn witchcraft, something's up. You don't just think, I think I'll study witchcraft. No, something has occurred. And a lot of times these things can be very scary for people. A lot of times people are carrying previous spiritual abuse, damage, spiritual trauma from birth religions. You know, so it can be really, really scary. And people starting out can be very vulnerable. And there are those out there who would take advantage of that vulnerability. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves, because it makes me real angry. And I'm generally a pretty easygoing person, but I get real feisty about this topic, about taking advantage of people's vulnerability. So some definite things that you know, Willow was hitting right on it. You can always leave. If they're telling you can't leave, run away. You can leave immediately, walk out the door. Because there are places that if there's always something else you have to do before you get the next secret, if they're not free with information, like you've signed up for a class, you've paid for what the context of that class or whatever, you should get all the information. It's not, I've got to do XYZ before I'm worthy of receiving the next information. You're probably joining a cult. If the leader seems to be very domineering, everybody does whatever they say, and they don't react well to being questioned or contradicted at all. Those are some really red flag warning signs. So I encourage you to read up on cult behavior and cult dynamics. If they restrict you from food or self-care or sleep in any way, that's a problem. Everything they're doing should be or relationships.
Or
everything they're doing should be to build you up, to empower you, to keep you healthy in body, mind, and spirit. And if they insist that, you know, if they diminish your experiences, sometimes it can be real passive aggressive. Like if you have an experience and they completely diminish it, maybe you had a different experience than what you think you had, and they're guiding you. That's not what I'm talking about. Maybe they're having to tell you some difficult truths about yourself. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about they're constantly diminishing you, making you feel unworthy, making you feel stupid, making you doubt what you experienced. That sort of thing that's abusive behaviors. And you want to avoid that for sure, because that can really mess you up. I've had a lot of people come to me for healing and guidance after having an experience like that. And it's very hard for them to recover. And sometimes they just turn away from their practice and close off spiritually for sometimes the rest of their lives, which is very, very tragic. But yeah, interview your teacher, have a sit down with them. Watch out for also love bombing. Oh my gosh, watch out for love bombing. They should never be telling you that the spirits have said that you were going to come and you're bringing all this power to the circle. And no, you're a brand new person off the street. They don't know you at all. If they're telling you that, they have an agenda. They're trying to build you up so that you feel attached. You know, they're trying to put that responsibility on you. If they want to come live in your house, that's a problem. If you're cleaning their floors, that's a problem. That's not how this works. And a lot of people come into witchcraft and they don't know how it works. So they just go along. Don't do that. But interview your teacher, interview their previous students, look at their credentials. You know, they should have, if they're teaching, they should have some kind of certification from somewhere, or, you know, at least be able to tell you who their teacher was or where they learned from. And it may be that they just read a lot of books. Okay, what books have you read? What's your philosophy? You know, how do you view this? You know, those sorts of things are very important ways of finding a good teacher. And, you know, talk to their teachers, talk to their teachers if they're still alive. Read about it. If they've got a website, read about their, like Willow was saying, read about their ideology, read about their philosophy on things and see if it's in alignment with what you're looking for, because there's so many options out there, so many.
Oh, I love it. That
was on a rant. That's a
touchy
topic for me.
I will say that is a touchy subject with her. I've heard her go off on that quite a few times.
Well, I think it needed to be talked about.
Absolutely.
Right, and you don't have to have sex with somebody to be in a group either. So
no, you do not. And sometimes they'll spring that on you at initiation. Get up and leave. I know you already spent all your money. That's fine. Leave. Bye. Now, consensual sex is part of an initiation. If it's consensual, I'm not judging. But no, if it's a requirement to be part of the circle, get out.
Yeah.
Run.
Yeah.
They're probably not very good anyway, if they got to require it.
So do we want to ask the one last question?
Go for it. Top it off.
Yeah, y'all got a few more minutes.
Yeah.
We don't start work until midnight anyway.
Yeah.
Not the witching hour yet.
Not the witching hour. The moon's not even full. You got time.
I'm not working tonight. I'm going to be in bed long before then.
You'll do dream work, huh?
Yeah.
This is dream work. Well, our last question we'll ask is from Jessica, and she wants to know, do y'all have a funny or heartfelt moment? What's a funny or heartfelt moment you have had as a witch? Anybody got one? So, you started, Sellena.
I'm tired of talking. My throat hurts.
Yeah.
Last time.
Oh my gosh, so many. There's so many. Okay, so this is a moving or heartfelt moment. How was this worded? Let me look at this question. A funny or heartfelt moment. Oh my gosh.
Funny or heartfelt.
Okay. Okay, this one, gosh, I'm thinking of all the stories that I tell my students so they will not learn the same lessons that I learned the hard way. So the time I blew up a house is a fun story that my students love. It's definitely funny. I'm not going to tell that story here though. You got to take my class to hear that story.
Okay, whatever, man.
No, I think for me, I guess when I light myself on fire accidentally. So I have a tendency to forget the candle snuffer. I always forget the damn snuffer. It's nearby, but I don't know where it is. And so if we're doing like a cauldron fire in class, there's one particular class where I'm very prone to do this. And we'll do the cauldron fire and then I put it out with the cauldron lid. Well, what's happening inside there is the alcohol droplets are accumulating on the lid. Okay, so this is what's happening. I'm continuing the class after that part. And then class is over, time to leave. I'm snuffing out the candles. Where's the snuffer? Nowhere. So I just snatched the cauldron lid. I'm going to put those candles out with that. And then my whole arm hairs get lit up. And I'm like, oh yeah, every time. So I did this 3 years in a row. And my students like this story because the upper level students will tell the other ones about it. And I think it's important for you to be able to make mistakes in front of your students and in front of your community. And even if you keep making the same mistake, I guess eventually I'll get it. I remember more now, but it was really funny for the first few years of just like hearing my older students telling the others, oh yeah, has she lit herself on fire yet? Did she tell you about when she blew up the house? Yeah, so that's always like heartwarming and funny to me at the same time, and a little self-deprecating, which is always, you know, there's a sick delight in that too.
I love that. Anybody else have a funny or heartwarming story you want to share? You'll probably think of it later tonight when you.
I will. Yeah,
Probably.
I can't even think of it. I was just like, I mean, I burned myself a ton of times. That's warming.
Yeah,
It is warming. It is warming. Hair warming, eyebrow warming.
yeah.
Wax.
Yeah.
I've learned how to get wax out of lots of things. Because you spill lots of wax. Yeah. So,
Method
but I
one,
can't
flip
think
it
of
over
funny.
and use the other side for
And then a lot.
And then it's like heavy on one side, and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I think I don't know, it's kind of funny to me. I think it's funny. One of the first times that you know, COVID had hit, and I was used to, you know, going to Sabbaths, you know, with our circle. And I was like, what do I do? Like, I just felt compelled to start hosting my own, and whether it would just be like me and Kelly, or it might just be three of us, you know, at the house. And so I think it was the first time that I ever did it, and I was like, okay, I've been studying. I took my notes, you know, that I didn't even look at, you know, apparently. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. We had all the stuff. We set up a beautiful altar. We had bread, wine, you know, everything was there. And then I started, and I just kind of went with it, and I did it backwards. Like, I pretty much did everything, but which there's no right and wrong way. I would like to, you know, clarify that. I mean, there's certain things that, you know, I like to do and commemorate, for probably not a good choice of word, but but I did everything backwards, and I think that it ended up and it wasn't even just backwards, it was kind of mixed up and entangled, and, you know, and I think we, you know, even casted the circle the wrong way, but it was just, to me, it was so funny. And the last thing we did was we ate the bread. But it worked out. Like, it all worked out. And I was like, well, maybe we should do that every time, because it kind of grounded us at the end of all that. So, you know, I don't know. I thought that was kind of funny.
Well, did y'all if you had fun, then I guess it was all okay.
We did.
If it works, then it works.
It did.
Effectiveness is the measure of truth. Did it work? Okay, then there you go. You did exactly what it needed to be.
There you go. Yeah.
I have a heartfelt one too. I think one of my favorite things that have happened to me since I've been a witch, one of the most heartfelt things, was seeing my grandmother in a past life. And that it still, it's like almost brings tears to my eyes, because, you know, and she told me my name, and that was just to see a past life like that, and it be so real. Like, I know it was real. I know she was standing there, and I know I said her name, and I know and she said I was at one of Sherry's past life regressions, and when she said my name, and it was her, my mama was there, and that my mama's mother, and then my daddy's father was there as well. And that was just, I mean, almost on a daily basis, I think about that.
So is that where you got your name, Willow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I love
It was a name of mine in a past life, but I work with it now because it just resonates so much with me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. So Emily, I guess we'll save the other list of questions for another time.
Yeah, thank y'all for coming on and spending an evening with us. This was so much fun.
Thanks for having us.
And I learned so much. I learned so much tonight.
I'm just amazed at the magic that just happens when people.
When you get 4 witches in a room.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, y'all all have a great evening.
Thank you.
You too, Emily. Thank
This
you.
was really nice. I appreciate the invitation. Bye, Kelly.
y'all.
Bye, Willow.
Wait,
I
are we
love you
supposed to
guys.
say yes? Blessed be. Is that right?
Yeah. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Bye, y'all.
All right. All right.
That sounded like the podcast. Bye.
Yep.
Okay. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent.